Grandpa Joe lived with his granddaughter Mary in the village of Pine Grove, just outside the woods. It had been a hard winter, with high winds and snow. It had not warmed once all winter, nor had fussy meltwater dripped from the hewn roofs. At night, chilled wolves howled in the woods. Grandpa Joe said they howled because they were jealous of people. A wolf wanted to live in a house too, to scratch and lie by the stove, to warm his icy, shaggy skin. In the midst of winter, my grandfather's tobacco went out. He coughed a lot, complained of poor health, and said that if he took a drag or two, he would feel better at once. On Sunday, Mary went to the neighboring town of Millville to get tobacco for her grandfather. The railroad ran through the town. Mary bought the tobacco, tied it in a chintz bag, and went to the station to watch the trains. They rarely stopped in Millville. Almost always they rushed past with clanking and rumbling. On the platform sat two soldiers. One was bearded with a merry gray eye. The locomotive roared. One could already see it, all steamed up, tearing furiously toward the station from the distant black forest. "Express," said the bearded soldier. "Look, little girl, the train will blow you away. You'll fly under the sky." The locomotive hit the station with a swing. The snow swirled and pelted my eyes. Then the wheels began to clatter, catching up with each other. Mary grabbed the lamppost and closed her eyes, wondering if she would be lifted off the ground and dragged behind the train. When the train had passed and the snow dust was still swirling in the air and landing on the ground, the bearded soldier asked Mary, "What's that in your sack? Tobacco?" "Tobacco," Mary replied. "Can you sell it? I'd like to smoke." "Grandpa Joe don't want me to sell it," Mary said sternly. "It's for his cough." "Oh, you," said the soldier, "a flower in boots. You're too serious." "Take as much as you need," said Mary, and handed the soldier a sack. "Smoke." The soldier poured a good handful of tobacco into his overcoat pocket, twisted a thick self-twist, smoked, took Mary by the chin and looked, chuckling into her blue eyes. "You," he repeated, "you pansies with pigtails. What can I thank you for? How can I thank you?" The soldier took out a small steel ring from his overcoat pocket, blew off crumbs of tobacco and salt, rubbed it on his sleeve, and put it on Mary's middle finger. "Wear it for good. This ring is absolutely marvelous. Look how it burns." "What makes it so wonderful, mister?" Mary asked, blushing. "Because," replied the soldier, "if you wear it on your middle finger, it will bring you health, for you and Grandpa Joe. And if you wear it on this one, on your ring finger," the soldier pulled Mary's chilled red finger, "you'll have great joy. Or for instance, if you want to see the white world with all its wonders, put the ring on your index finger and you will see it for sure." "Would you?" Mary asked. "And you believe him," said another soldier from under the raised collar of his overcoat. "He's a wizard. Have you heard that word?" "I have." "Well, that's just it," laughed the soldier. "He's an old engineer. Not even a landmine could take him." "Thank you," Mary said, and ran back to her place in Pine Grove. The wind picked up, and a thick, thick snow fell. Mary kept touching the ring, turning it and watching it glisten in the winter light. "Why did the soldier forget to tell me about the little finger?" she thought. "What will happen then? Let me put the ring on my little finger and try it." She put the ring on his little finger. It was skinny, and the ring did not stay on, fell into the deep snow near the path, and immediately dived to the snowy bottom. Mary groaned and began to shovel the snow with her hands, but there was no ring. Her fingers were turning blue. They were so stiff from the frost that they would not bend. Mary cried. The ring was gone. Then Grandpa Joe's health would be gone, and she would have no joy, and she would never see the white world with all its wonders. Mary stuck an old spruce branch in the snow where she had dropped the ring and went home. She wiped her tears with her mitten, but they still came and froze, and it hurt her eyes. Grandpa Joe was glad of the tobacco and smoked the whole house and said of the ring, "Don't you grieve, child. Where it fell, it's still there. You ask Sid, he'll find it for you." Sid, the old sparrow, slept on the pole, bloated like a balloon. All winter long, Sid lived in Joe's house like a master. Not only Mary, but his grandfather himself had to reckon with his temperament. He nibbled the porridge right out of the bowls and tried to snatch the bread out of his hands, and when he was driven away, he took offense, fidgeted, and began to fight and chirp so angrily that the neighbors' sparrows flew under the roof, listened, and then made a long noise, condemning Sid for his bad temper. He lives in a house, warm and well-fed, and yet he can't get enough. The next day, Mary caught Sid, wrapped him in a handkerchief, and carried him into the woods. Only the very tip of a spruce branch was sticking out from under the snow. Mary put Sid on the branch and asked, "You look for it. You might find it." But Sid squinted his eyes, looked incredulously at the snow and squeaked, "There's more. There's another one. You found a fool." Sid flew off the branch and flew back into the house. The ring was never found. Grandpa Joe coughed more and more. By spring, he climbed up on the stove. He hardly ever came down from there, and he kept asking for a drink. Mary gave him cold water in an iron ladle. Blizzards swirled over the village, drifting the houses. The pines were covered with snow, and Mary could no longer find the place in the woods where she had dropped the ring. More and more often, she hid behind the stove and cried quietly in pity for her grandfather and scolded herself. "Fool," she whispered. She had spoiled herself and dropped the ring. "That's what you'll get for this. Here's for that." She beat her fist on her forehead, punishing herself, and Grandpa Joe asked, "Who are you making all that noise with?" "Sid," Mary said. "He's gotten so naughty. He's always trying to fight." One morning, Mary woke up to Sid jumping on the window and tapping his beak on the glass. Mary opened her eyes and squeezed them shut. Long raindrops were falling from the roof, racing against each other. Warm light was shining through the window. The rooks were shrieking. Mary looked outside. A warm wind blew into her eyes and ruffled her hair. "It's spring," Mary said. The black branches glistened. The wet snow rustled as it slid down from the roofs, and the damp woods rustled importantly and cheerfully beyond the outskirts. Spring walked through the fields like a young mistress. As soon as she looked at a ravine, a brook began to gurgle and shimmer in it. Spring walked on, and the sound of the brooks grew louder and louder with each step. The snow in the forest darkened. First, the brown needles that had fallen off during the winter appeared on it. Then there were many dry twigs, which had been broken by the storm in December, and then the yellowing of last year's fallen leaves, the thawing of the snow, and the first blossoms of mother and stepmother plants blooming at the edge of the last snow drifts. Mary found an old spruce branch in the woods, the one she had stuck in the snow where she had dropped her ring, and began to carefully shovel away old leaves, empty cones thrown by woodpeckers, twigs, and rotten moss. Beneath one black leaf, a light gleamed. Mary cried out and crouched down. There it was, the steel ring. It was not rusty in the slightest. Mary grabbed it, put it on her middle finger, and ran home. As she ran toward the house, she saw Grandpa Joe. He was out of the house, sitting on the porch, and the blue smoke from the tobacco was rising above Grandpa straight up to the sky, as if Joe were drying out in the spring sunshine and the vapor was blowing over him. "Well," said the grandfather, you naughty girl, ran out of the house, forgot to shut the door, and blew the whole house with the light air. And at once I was free of the disease. I'm going to have a smoke, and I'm going to get an axe, and I'm going to get some wood, and we'll fire up the stove and bake rye cakes." Mary laughed, stroked her grandfather's gray hair, and said, "Thank you for the ring. It cured you, Grandpa Joe." All day Mary wore the ring on her middle finger to keep her grandfather's sickness at bay. Only in the evening, when she went to bed, she took the ring off her middle finger and put it on her ring finger. After that, a great joy was to come. But it delayed. It did not come, and Mary fell asleep without waiting. She rose early, dressed, and left the house. Silent and warm dawn was dawning over the land. The stars were still burning at the edge of the sky. Mary walked toward the woods. At the edge of the forest, she stopped. What was that tinkling in the woods? As if someone were gently moving bells. Mary bent down, listened, and splashed her hands. The white snowdrops swayed a little, nodded to the dawn, and each flower tinkled as if a little beetle was sitting in it and beating its foot on the silver cobwebs. At the top of a pine tree, a woodpecker struck 5 times. 5 o'clock, Mary thought. How early, and silence. Immediately, an oriole sang high in the branches in the golden dawn light. Mary stood with her mouth open, listening, smiling. A strong, warm, caressing wind blew over her, and something rustled near her. A hazel tree swayed, yellow pollen sprinkled from its nut earrings. Someone walked unseen past Mary, gently pulling branches away. Toward him a cuckoo cuckooed, bowed. Who was it that passed by? And I didn't notice, Mary thought. She didn't know it was spring that had passed her by. Mary laughed loudly, all through the forest, and ran home. And a great joy, a joy that could not be captured with her hands, rang and sang in her heart. The spring was growing brighter and more cheerful every day. So much light poured from the sky that Grandpa Joe's eyes became narrow as slits, but they laughed all the time. And then, as if someone had splashed magic water on them, thousands of flowers bloomed and blossomed all at once through the woods and meadows and ravines. Mary thought of putting the ring on her forefinger to see the white world with all its wonders. But she looked at all those flowers, at the sticky birch leaves, at the clear sky and the hot sun, listened to the crowing of the roosters, the tinkling of the water, the whistling of the birds over the fields, and did not put the ring on her forefinger. I'll make it, she thought. Nowhere in the world can it be so good as here at Pine Grove. It's a beauty of a place. There's a reason Grandpa Joe says our land is a true paradise, and there's no other land so good in all the world.